She told the entire church I manipulated my dying grandmother to steal a seven-figure inheritance. She said I was just the farm girl who stayed behind for the money. But what she did not know was that the will had a no contest clause. The estate included hidden mineral rights worth over $1.3 million. And the moment she filed her lawsuit in probate court, she triggered the clause that erased her inheritance instead. By April, her legal fees were climbing past $12,000. Her $78,000 in debt was compounding at 9% interest, and before the court even closed the case, her husband had moved out. I am Rowan Keller, and this is how her revenge lawsuit destroyed her life instead of mine. Chapter 1. The day they called me the farm girl. I was standing 10 feet from my grandmother's casket when my sister leaned toward her husband and said loud enough for half the chapel to hear, "The farm girl actually showed up." It was my grandmother's funeral, and they were already calculating an inheritance they assumed I did not deserve. Something in her tone told me this was never about grief. A few heads turned, not shocked, not sympathetic, just curious. In Franklin County, Virginia, people notice everything and pretend they do not. I kept my eyes on my grandmother, Ruth Ann Keller, laid out in her pale blue church suit, the same one she wore every Easter for as long as I can remember. My jacket still carried the sharp scent of antiseptic and damp hay. I had been up since 4 that morning helping a mare deliver a breech foal outside Rocky Mount. I rinsed my hands in a barn sink, changed my shirt in the cab of my truck, and drove straight to the service. My boots were still streaked with mud. My name is Delaney Brooks. I am 36 years old, and I work as a large animal veterinary technician at Blue Ridge Equine and Livestock Clinic. I make just under $60,000 a year. It's steady work, honest work, the kind that pays bills and keeps animals alive. It does not come with filters or followers. My sister, Vivian Carter, is 41 and has lived in Charlotte, North Carolina since 2014. She calls herself a brand consultant. She talks about positioning and leverage and scaling revenue. She posts photos of rooftop dinners and curated mornings. Today, she wore a tailored cream coat and oversized sunglasses that she never took off indoors. She did not look at me when she made her comment. She adjusted her purse strap and smoothed her hair, as if this were a networking event instead of a funeral. Our father, Martin Keller, stood near the entrance, greeting people like he was hosting something important. He moved to Tampa in 2011 when the housing market shifted and rebuilt himself as an insurance agent. He hugged neighbors he had not visited in years and told them he wished he could have been around more. I wondered which years he meant. I moved back to Grandma's farmhouse in 2017 when she slipped on her back steps and shattered her hip. 90 acres outside Boone's Mill. Pasture, barn, a house built in the late 50s that had never known a renovation it could not survive. I told myself it would be temporary, 6 months, maybe a year. Then the diagnosis came in 2019. Every Tuesday morning, I drove her to Corallian Franklin Memorial Hospital for chemo. I learned how to read lab results and adjust medication times around my clinic schedule. I learned how to lift her without hurting her pride. I learned that real love looks like paperwork and pill organizers and sitting quietly in waiting rooms. In 2021, she fell at 3 in the morning trying to get to the bathroom alone. I woke up to her voice, thin and embarrassed. I carried her back to bed and stayed until sunrise. Then I drove to a farm in Wirtz because a cow was in labor, and the world does not pause because your grandmother is sick. Vivian visited twice in those years, once for Thanksgiving in 2018, once for a long weekend in 2022 when she left early because the house felt heavy. Heavy is what 6 years of caretaking feels like. It does not look impressive in a caption. After the service, neighbors lined up to shake our hands. They told me Grandma was lucky to have me. Vivian smiled beside me like we had shared equal shifts. When someone mentioned how long I had been living at the farm, she laughed softly and said, "Well, at least Delaney got free rent out of it." There it was again, the story she preferred, that I had benefited, that I had already collected my portion of whatever inheritance might exist. We drove out to the farmhouse for the reception. That's how it works here. You bury someone, then you feed everyone who loved them. The kitchen filled with casseroles and sweet tea. The oak tree out front cast a long winter shadow across the porch. Vivian walked through the house slowly, fingers trailing along the banister like she was touring a listing. She paused in the hallway and studied the hardwood floors. "These are original, right?" she asked, not because she cared, but because she was calculating. I was at the sink rinsing platters when she came up beside me. "Do you know what the property taxes were in 2024?" she asked casually. "Around 4,000 and change," I said. "I pay them online now." She nodded, already somewhere else in her head. Later, I overheard her telling her husband that agricultural land in Franklin County had increased nearly 20% since 2022. 90 acres within driving distance of Roanoke could easily cross 7 figures, she said quietly, like she was testing the weight of the number. 7 figures. That was the first time I heard my grandmother reduced to a valuation. By that evening, my phone buzzed with a new group text, Keller Estate Discussion. Vivian had created it. She sent links to recent land sales near Boone's Mill. Martin replied that spring 2025 would be ideal to list, before interest rates shifted again. They discussed timing, market comps, buyer demand. They spoke about the estate as if probate were a minor technicality and inheritance were simply a transaction waiting to close. No one asked whether there was a will. No one asked what Grandma had already arranged. I did not correct them. When most of the neighbors left and the house grew quiet, Vivian cornered me in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I counted out chemo pills and wrote appointment times on the calendar. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, perfectly calm. "We will have to make decisions soon," she said. "Selling is probably the cleanest. Split everything 3 ways and move on. That's what Grandma would have wanted." I watched the late afternoon lights settle over the worn floor. "You've been living here since 2017, Delaney. 6 years without paying rent. That's not nothing." She said it gently, like she was explaining basic math to someone who didn't understand equity. But what Vivian did not understand was that this was never about free housing or lifestyle. It was about responsibility. It was about who stayed when the hospital bills arrived and who left when the house felt inconvenient. In September 2023, I drove Grandma to an attorney's office in Roanoke. I sat in the waiting room while she met with him privately. When she came out, she looked tired but certain. She did not update her will because she was confused. She updated it because she had seen exactly who was counting and who was carrying. 5 weeks before she passed, she told me over coffee at the kitchen table that loyalty mattered more than noise, that an inheritance is not a reward for blood, it's a record of who showed up. Vivian kept talking about fairness. Martin chimed in from the doorway about market timing and smart exits. I dried the last plate and set it down carefully. They were already dividing a 7-figure estate they assumed would be split evenly. They had no idea that the inheritance they were planning to sell had already been decided. Chapter 2. The Probate Meeting. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Roanoke, waiting for numbers to replace assumptions. Traffic moved below the building like any other weekday. Inside that room, the air felt thinner. Vivian arrived in a tailored navy suit, expression composed, phone placed face down on the table as if she were preparing for a negotiation. My father, Martin, took the chair closest to the attorney, posture confident, as if proximity might translate into influence. Across from us sat Gregory Shaw, 60 years old, estate attorney for nearly 3 decades. Calm voice, measured breathing, a man who did not dramatize facts because facts were enough. He folded his hands. "Thank you for coming. This is not a ceremonial reading. This is a probate strategy meeting regarding the will executed in September 2023. Vivian's eyes sharpened. "September 2023? She repeated. "That late?" Gregory nodded once. "Your grandmother signed the final version of her estate plan on September 15th, 2023. She appointed one sole executor, Delaney Brooks." The room shifted without anyone physically moving. Martin blinked. "Sole executor?" "Yes," Gregory said evenly. Vivian gave a short laugh that carried no humor. "I am sorry, but that cannot be correct. We assumed it would be shared responsibility." Gregory opened the folder in front of him. The estate assets include 90 acres of agricultural property in Franklin County, the primary residence, all attached fixtures and equipment listed in Appendix B. Liquid funds at Valley First Credit Union total $418,000 as of January 31st, 2025. Vivian's fingers stilled on the table. $418,000? She said slowly. In addition, Gregory continued, recent comparable sales placed the land valuation at approximately $1.3 million. The number seemed to land physically between us. $1.3 million. For a brief second, I felt my chest tighten, not because I had not known the estimate, but because hearing it spoken aloud changed the temperature of the room. That was no longer a sentimental farm. That was a seven-figure estate. Combined with liquid assets, the gross estate approaches seven figures, Gregory finished. There is no federal estate tax liability under the current threshold. Martin leaned forward. So that gets divided three ways? Gregory did not hesitate. The farmland, residence, and attached assets are devised in full to Delaney Brooks. Silence stretched. Vivian stared at him as if he had misread the page. And me? She asked carefully. Gregory's tone did not shift. You are bequeathed your grandmother's handwritten recipe journal and a family photo album dated 1984. The color drained from her face. You are serious. I am. Martin shifted in his seat. And what about me? Gregory slid 5 documents across the table. These are promissory notes executed between 2013 and 2019. Your mother loaned you a total of $54,000 at 3% annual interest. The will directs the estate to collect the outstanding principal and accrued interest. Martin stared at the papers. That was family support. It was documented as loans, Gregory replied, not gifts. Vivian turned to me now, eyes sharp. You knew this inheritance was structured like this. I kept my voice even. I knew she met with an attorney. She did not share details. Gregory spoke before the silence could thicken further. For clarity, your grandmother met privately with me. On October 3, 2023, she was evaluated by her primary physician, Dr. Melissa Crane, who documented full legal capacity and orientation. 2 independent witnesses were present at signing. Vivian shook her head. She was sick. She was medicated. Illness does not equal incapacity, Gregory said calmly. The documentation supporting this will is comprehensive. Martin exhaled sharply. So Delaney controls the estate? That is correct. Sole authority over management decisions, asset retention, and disposition. Vivian's composure cracked. So because she played nurse, she walks away with $1.3 million? The words hung there, raw. I did not raise my voice. I did not play anything. I was there. There was a tight pause, sharp enough to cut. Gregory continued. There is a no contest provision in the will. If any beneficiary initiates a legal challenge to contest the will and is unsuccessful, they forfeit any gift provided to them and may be responsible for legal fees. Vivian's jaw tightened. So if I challenge this inheritance decision, I lose the cookbook and the album. Yes. And if you pursue an inheritance dispute and fail, Gregory added, you may incur significant legal expenses in addition to forfeiting your bequest. Martin ran a hand down his face. She always believed in fairness. Gregory met his eyes. The will defines fairness as contribution and presence. Those are her exact words. That hit harder than the valuation. For a moment, no one spoke. The room felt smaller, heavier. I watched Vivian's fingers tremble before she clasped them together. She was not grieving. She was calculating loss, legal risk, public perception. In my mind, I saw my grandmother at the kitchen table, coffee mug in her hands, telling me that money reveals character faster than tragedy ever could. Vivian stood up abruptly. This is unbelievable. A 7-figure estate, and you expect us to accept a recipe book? Acceptance is not required for probate to proceed. Compliance is. Martin remained seated, staring at the promissory notes as if they might rearrange themselves into something else. Vivian looked at me now, eyes sharp. You knew this inheritance was structured like this? I kept my voice even. I knew she met with an attorney. She did not share details. Gregory spoke before the silence could thicken further. For clarity, your grandmother met privately with me. On October 3, 2023, she was evaluated by her primary physician, Dr. Melissa Crane, who documented full legal capacity and orientation. 2 independent witnesses were present at signing. Gregory closed the folder. You are entitled to consult independent counsel. I would advise reviewing the no contest clause carefully before initiating any legal challenge to this will. We walked out of the conference room in silence. The hallway felt brighter than it had earlier, almost harsh. Inside the elevator, Vivian's mask slipped. This is not over, she said under her breath. This inheritance is not settled. The doors opened to the lobby. Before we even reached the parking garage, she was already dialing a litigation attorney. Chapter 3. When Greed Becomes Expensive. Her threat did not cool off after that afternoon in the parking garage. By mid-March, the inheritance dispute was no longer just talk. It had a case number. Gregory called me while I was cleaning out a stall at the clinic. She filed in Davidson County Probate Court, he said. Formal petition to contest the will. Allegation of undue influence. I leaned against the barn wall. She was warned. Yes, he replied. The no contest clause was clearly explained in writing and verbally in our meeting. Filing the inheritance lawsuit triggered the clause immediately. Under Virginia law, the act of formally contesting the will placed her bequest at risk regardless of the outcome. In other words, she had already forfeited the only 2 items left to her. Later that day, I received the official documentation by email. Vivian Carter, age 41, had retained a Nashville litigation firm specializing in estate litigation. The complaint stated that I exerted undue influence over our grandmother during a period of medical vulnerability. Undue influence. The phrase looked clinical and cold on the screen. Gregory called again that evening. Her attorney required a $5,600 retainer to initiate the probate challenge. That does not include ongoing hourly fees. $5,600 just to begin a lawsuit she had been explicitly warned against? If this proceeds to discovery, Gregory continued, she could easily face $20,000 to $30,000 in legal fees before any hearing. I sat at the kitchen table where Grandma used to sort mail and felt the weight of those numbers settle. Meanwhile, the no contest provision stood firm. If the court upholds the will, which the documentation strongly supports, she loses her bequest permanently. 2 weeks after the filing, Daniel Carter drove down alone. He looked older than he had a month ago. We need to talk, he said, standing in the doorway. I poured coffee and waited. The promissory notes are valid, I answered. That was family help. It was documented as loans. He exhaled sharply. You are really going to collect $54,000 from your own father? I am executing the estate as instructed. There was a pause, long enough for regret to surface and sink again. This inheritance dispute is ruining everything, he muttered. It was already fragile, I replied. After I hung up, I sat in silence. For a moment, a crack opened in me. Not guilt, exactly. Something closer to fatigue. Was holding the line turning me into someone colder than I intended to be? Then I remembered lifting Grandma off cold tile at 3 a.m. I remembered the hospital parking lot at dawn. I remembered her words. The land belongs to whoever stays. That steadied me. At the end of March, Vivian pulled into the driveway again. She stepped out without the polished armor she usually wore. "We need to fix this," she said before I could speak. I waited. The legal fees are stacking up. The probate court process is dragging. Dad is furious. Daniel is barely speaking to me. We can negotiate. Negotiate what? You keep the house, we sell part of the land, you give me a cash settlement, I withdraw the lawsuit. The lawsuit already triggered the no contest clause, I said. That cannot be undone. Her eyes flashed. That is just legal technicality. It is enforceable language. She took a step closer. You are hiding behind paperwork while I drown. You filed the inheritance lawsuit, I said calmly. You hired the attorney. You borrowed money based on an assumption. She looked at me as if I had betrayed something sacred. You think you are righteous. No, I said quietly. I think I honored her wishes. Her voice cracked. You are willing to watch my credit collapse over this? I did not answer immediately. For a brief second, I imagined writing her a check just to quiet the chaos, to restore something familiar, to avoid the public spectacle of probate court. Then I remembered the certified mail receipt, the legal capacity letter from Dr. Crane, the months of documentation. No contest has been activated, I repeated. The estate cannot be negotiated under pressure. She stared at me, anger dissolving into something more fragile. This is not how I thought it would go. That was the first honest thing she had said. The gravel crunched under her tires when she left. By the end of March, her inheritance lawsuit was still pending in probate court, but the consequences were already tangible. Her legal fees were rising, her debt was compounding, her credit was slipping, and for the first time, it was clear that the probate case was still open, but the financial damage had already begun. Chapter 4. What was under the land? In April, a second valuation surfaced, and this one did not sit in a bank account. It sat beneath the soil. Victor Alvarez from Blue Ridge Resource Advisory called me on a Monday afternoon. "I understand you are the executor for the Keller estate," he said. "I am." "I would like to review the mineral rights attached to your property. They were registered in 1978 and never leased." Mineral rights. The phrase did not belong to fences and cattle. It belonged to contracts and leverage. I drove to his office in Roanoke later that week. He spread survey maps and registry documents across a wide oak desk. "Your grandfather retained full subsurface rights when he purchased the acreage in 1978, Victor explained. "Those rights remain attached to the probate estate. They were never sold, never leased." He pointed to a shaded zone on a geological report. Preliminary lithium exploration began in 2024 across parts of Western Virginia. Your 90 acres fall within a zone of active corporate interest. I felt my pulse shift. What does that mean in practical terms? It means if you enter a mineral lease agreement at current market rates, the signing bonus alone could reach approximately $1.35 million. Royalty percentages would depend on extraction viability. 1.35 million. For a moment, I stopped hearing him. That number was not farmland. That was leverage. Combined with the $418,000 in liquid assets and the current property valuation, the total estate asset value would approach $1.76 million. The inheritance lawsuit Vivian filed was built on the assumption of one valuation. This would change that calculation entirely. Victor studied my expression. "This materially impacts the probate estate value," he said, "and any potential settlement leverage." Settlement leverage. The word lingered. "What would happen to the surface?" I asked. "Access roads, possibly drilling pads depending on lease structure. You can negotiate restrictions, but there would be change." Change. That was the part the spreadsheets did not capture. "Has anyone else inquired?" I asked. "There was a public records search in November 2024, he replied carefully, "before your grandmother passed." I went straight to the Franklin County Clerk's office. Deputy Clerk Amanda Price pulled the registry file without commentary. There was an inquiry filed November 18, 2024, she said, submitted by Vivian Carter. Before Grandma died. The realization did not shock me. It clarified something. Vivian had not simply expected inheritance. She had researched what lay beneath the land while the estate was still unsettled. That night, I walked the perimeter fence alone. The posture looked the same. The barn roof still sagged slightly on the east side. The oak tree near the porch cast its familiar shadow. Underneath all of it was a potential asset worth more than the surface combined. $1.35 million in lease bonus, additional royalties if extraction proved viable, debt erased, legal fees irrelevant, security extended beyond my lifetime. But at what cost? I imagined trucks on gravel, heavy equipment carving paths through grass that had grown uninterrupted for decades. I imagined neighbors whispering that I had sold out. Then I imagined the probate court hearing, Vivian arguing undue influence while secretly calculating lithium royalties. 2 days later, an email arrived from Appalachian Ridge Energy. Subject: inquiry regarding mineral lease opportunity within Keller acreage. They requested a formal meeting within 30 days. Attached were projected signing bonus estimates between $1.3 and $1.4 million, depending on acreage allocation and depth parameters. 30 days. The inheritance lawsuit was still active in probate court. If I signed a mineral lease, the estate valuation would increase significantly. Vivian's legal challenge would suddenly involve a larger financial exposure. I called Gregory. If I enter a mineral lease while litigation is pending, does that complicate probate? It increases the estate asset value, he said, which increases the potential stakes of the inheritance dispute. It may strengthen your position, or it may escalate her motivation. So either way, it changes the battlefield. Yes. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. We need to discuss the mineral rights, Vivian texted. Public record moves fast. How did you find out? I replied. Asset valuation changes are visible if you look, she wrote back. She arrived the following afternoon. You are considering signing, aren't you? She said without greeting. I am evaluating the asset. She walked towards the fence line, staring at the open field. You are sitting on nearly $2 million now. That changes everything. It changes the estate valuation, not the will. Her eyes sharpened. It changes settlement leverage. You could end the inheritance lawsuit with a single check. You did not care about the land, I said quietly. You cared about what was under it. She flinched. I was being responsible. You researched the mineral registry before she died. The wind moved through the grass between us. That was due diligence, she insisted. For yourself. She stepped closer. If you sign that lease, drilling rigs will sit on this property. Is that what she would have wanted? I held her gaze. If you win your inheritance lawsuit, you would sell this land in a week. Her silence answered for her. Appalachian Ridge Energy's proposal remained open for 30 days. After that, interest rates and corporate budgets could shift. 30 days to decide whether to convert legacy into liquidity. 30 days to determine whether protecting the surface mattered more than maximizing estate assets. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lease proposal printed in front of me. Grandma used to say, the land is not just dirt, it's responsibility. Responsibility to preserve, responsibility to provide. The inheritance lawsuit was still active. The estate valuation was no longer theoretical. The financial exposure on both sides was increasing. My finger hovered over the email reply. 30 days before the estate value changed again. Chapter 5. Quiet Power. I did not press send that night. Instead, I closed the laptop and let the mineral lease proposal sit on the kitchen table where my grandmother used to sort bills. The inheritance dispute was still technically active in probate court, but something in me had already settled. A week later, Evelyn came back. She did not arrive with sunglasses or rehearsed outrage. She parked near the fence and walked toward the porch with her shoulders slightly curved inward. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I nodded for her to sit. "I am withdrawing the inheritance lawsuit," she said. "My attorney is drafting the dismissal. I cannot afford to keep fighting." The probate case had already cost her more than she expected. The $5,600 retainer had grown to over $12,000 in legal fees once motions and responses were filed. The no contest clause had activated the moment she challenged the will. Her bequest was permanently forfeited. "You were warned," I said gently. "I know," she replied. "I thought I could force a settlement once the estate value increased." She looked out at the pasture. "I did not expect you to hold your ground." "Daniel moved out in May," she continued. "He said he could not build a marriage on projected inheritance. He called it financial fantasy." I felt no satisfaction hearing that. "Dad signed the repayment agreement," she added. $54,000 plus interest, monthly installments for the next 3 years. Lauren found out everything when the certified letter arrived. The financial consequences had rippled outward. The inheritance dispute had become more than paperwork. It had become exposure. "The probate case will be officially closed once the court processes the dismissal," I said, "but the no contest clause remains enforceable. That cannot be reversed." She nodded. "I know I lost the inheritance." There was a long silence between us. "Do you hate me?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I just do not fear you anymore." Her expression shifted. Not anger, something closer to recognition. "For years, I thought leaving made me stronger," she said. "I thought staying meant you were stuck." "Staying was not weakness," I answered. "It was responsibility." She inhaled slowly. "I should not have filed the inheritance lawsuit." "No, you should not have." 2 weeks later, Gregory confirmed the formal dismissal. The probate case was closed. The inheritance dispute was resolved. The estate settlement was finalized according to the will. Evelyn walked away with legal fees exceeding $12,000, $78,400 in personal debt at 9% interest, and a credit score still recovering from overextension. The church board quietly removed her from the community outreach committee, not as punishment, but because financial controversies tend to linger in small congregations. Dad began making his repayment installments on time. Each check cleared was a reminder that promissory notes are not suggestions. The estate account remained intact. I met again with Victor Alvarez to review the mineral lease proposal. The offer remained strong, $1.35 million in signing bonus, potential royalties if extraction proved viable. The estate value would climb close to $1.76 million if I signed. It would eliminate any lingering financial anxiety. It would transform the property from farmland into leveraged asset. It would also alter the land permanently. I walked the acreage alone before making the decision. The oak tree near the porch stood steady. The barn roof, recently repaired, no longer sagged. The fields rolled quietly under late spring light. Grandma once said that land is not owned. It is held in trust for the next decision. Security can come from contracts, I thought, but peace rarely does. In early June 2025, I declined the lease. I thanked Appalachian Ridge Energy for their interest and explained that the estate would not pursue mineral extraction at this time. The financial leverage remained hypothetical. The surface remained untouched. The estate settlement was closed. The inheritance dispute was resolved. The financial consequences had fallen where they belonged. I continued working at Blue Ridge Equine and Livestock Clinic. I paid the property taxes. I fixed fences. I ordered new seed for the back pasture. The land did not need to be louder to be valuable. One evening in late June, I sat on the porch watching the sun lower across the 90 acres. For the first time in months, there were no pending motions, no certified mail, no litigation deadlines. The probate case was fully resolved. Grandma used to say that the loudest person in the room is often the one who feels the poorest inside. I used to think she meant money. Now I understand she meant certainty. Evelyn lost the inheritance, she lost the lawsuit, she lost the illusion that leverage guarantees control. She is rebuilding slowly, without projected windfalls. Dad is repaying what he owed, one check at a time. The estate remains intact, and I remain here, not because I could not leave, because I chose not to. Quiet power is not loud revenge. It is not public humiliation. It is not dramatic victory. It is endurance. It is honoring what was entrusted to you even when it would be easier to monetize it. If you have ever been underestimated for staying, for caregiving, for choosing roots over applause, remember this. Your value is not measured by how loudly someone else calculates your worth. It is measured by what you protect when no one is watching. If this story meant something to you, stay with this channel. There are more stories where strength does not need noise to prove itself. If you value stories where strength is quiet but unshakable, subscribe.